Starting with this video and for the next set of videos, we're going to work on applying materials and shaders to all of the objects in our scene. As you can see, everything has already been imported. However, by default, it looks kind of grayish and bland, of course. So we're going to go ahead and play some really cool materials and textures and things and get this stuff looking good. So in this first video, I want to show you the basics of materials and shaders inside of Unity 3 and what we can do with them. Okay. So first things first, I'm going to go ahead and select an object to start applying textures to. If you select some of these objects and you look at them in a hierarchy view, there's always a parent node, basically a null node up here that has nothing. And then under that, you're going to find all the different individual assets. Okay, so for example, for the street, you can see up here in the hierarchy view, here's a street. If I expand that, there's one object that belongs to the street, which is the actual street mesh down here. And we can see over here in the inspector, we get the mesh renderer over here. And then finally down here, we'll have the material. So right now the material is called street-exterior street parking lot. Okay, and by default, Unity doesn't know what kind of shader you want to apply to this, but so by default it applies just a regular diffuse shader. So let's talk a little bit about shaders. Okay, there's two ways that you can work with shaders inside of Unity. A, you can use the built-in shaders, which is a huge library of already pre-made coded shaders for you to start using. They're really good. I recommend this for most users, even advanced users. And then B, the second way to work with shaders is to actually create and program your own. However, if you're not a shader programmer, if you're not a shader developer, then the best way for you to go is by actually using these shader presets that are over here. So if you click on where it says diffuse over here, that'll open up this menu. And then from this menu, you can choose all the built-in shaders that come with Unity 3.0. This is basically the factory library of shaders. So we have a lot of different shaders. So let's start off with a simple diffuse shader. Right now I have the kind of street floor object selected here. Okay, and over here we can see we have a main color for this shader, which if we take it and we make it red, for example, we'll give it a red hue. Alright. We also have a base RGB, and this can actually be defined by an actual texture map that's created outside of Unity, say in a 2D image editing program like Photoshop. Let's just see really quick how this works. We need to apply texture to this. Right now we can see in this little item block over here, it says none texture 2D. There's no texture defined. So what you can do is you can click on this little select button down here, and that's going to open up the new asset browser. This is a new browser inside of Unity 3. The previous one was kind of too simple, so they improved it and they added this really cool asset browser which opens up a separate window. If I take this little slider up here in the top right and I push it toward the right, I get really big thumbnails. Okay? If I push it all the way to the left, I go from thumbnails to basically a list, an asset list kind of organization method here. Basically what I'm looking for is a texture that belongs to this street-exterior street parking lot object. So I'll look for something with a similar name. So here's exterior street parking lot is the one that we're looking for. So here it is, exterior street parking lot diffuse. Okay, we have different maps here that I've created. There's a bump map, which is actually a normal map. We have a diffuse map, and we have a height map. And the one I want to plug in is the diffuse map. So I'll just double click it to tell Unity that's what I want. You can see over here in the little texture swatch, you can see the thumbnail right there of the texture. And if we look inside the viewport, we can actually see the texture. Make sure you're in textured mode, however. If you're in a wireframe mode, you won't be able to see it. So you want to make sure you're in textured mode in your viewport. Okay. The next thing to be able to work with this shader is being able to see it interact with lighting. Right now we see the texture very bland. Okay. To be able to see it a little bit better, it'd be best to create some test lights. If I turn on light mode right now, I pretty much get nothing. It's completely dark in here because there's no lights. I haven't created any, so I would have to create some to be able to see something look more interesting. To create lights is pretty simple. I'm going to go up here to Game Object. I'm going to go to Create Other. And then down here I have a list of 3 light types that we can use in Unity. We can use point lights, spotlights, and directional lights. And we're going to be talking about lighting in a separate video further down the road. Right now, just go ahead and create a point light. This is just for testing purposes. I want to make sure this point light is located right here, sort of above my floor. There's a few ways we can do that. If I hit Alt, Control, and F on a keyboard, I can place the light right in the center of where my camera's looking at. If I come over here to Game Object Down here I can see that if I hit Control Alt and F, I move to View. I can also align with View. Let's come over here and let's place this. Another way to place this is using a cool new feature inside of Unity using vertex snapping. Okay, you can actually snap to vertices of objects, and the way you do this is pretty simple. You can hold down V, move the object, and you'll see that it snaps to the vertices of the street object down here. If I move this up, you can see the light is actually affecting the street or the asphalt. Okay, notice the light has these little icons here, which I can click and drag these little squares out to increase the range of the light. I can also go to the inspector and increase the range interactively over here, which is what I'm going to do. And I can increase the intensity of the light as well. Okay, so here's the light. It's lighting up the ground right now. And we're just using a regular diffuse texture. So let me select the object. Here's the material. The diffuse texture just does a texture map on top of it. For next-gen games, this works pretty good for objects that are not important. An object that would be important, though, is the floor that the player is going to be running along for most of the game. So you would want that to look good. So instead of using a diffuse texture, we can use, say, a bump diffuse texture. And if I apply that, basically now we have a normal map slot that we can use. Okay? So I actually have, if I go to select and I go to the parking lot, I have a bump map here that I can use for this. Okay? I'm going to double click on it to open it up, and this is new behavior inside of Unity 3. You notice I get a warning message that says this texture is not marked as a normal map, and then there's a button that says fix now. The way that Unity 3 works now is when you bring in a normal map, you have to actually mark it as a normal map. You can't just bring it in and use it just like that. That's not the way it works right now. So basically what happens is if I click on a texture swatch, and the texture is going to pop up right here in the project view. If I click on that bump map, here's the bump map. Remember in the texture importer settings how we could set a texture type? Well, if you're using just a diffuse texture, texture mode is fine. But if you're using normal map, you might want to switch this over to normal map. Okay? That way, Unity knows to apply this as a normal map. Let me revert. Let me go back to the object here. But the quickest way to do this is just to hit the Fix Now button, and Unity will fix that for you automatically. So you don't have to go find the texture, change the import settings, apply it, and then go back to the object. This does it very fast and easily. So it's something that you can't forget. You have to remember that when you use a normal map, it has to be marked as a normal map. Fortunately, Unity gives us that warning message that lets us know. So here it is with a normal map. Let me go back and set this as a regular diffuse. So here's with no normal map, no bump mapping whatsoever. And here it is with the bump map. The bump map helps to make it look a little bit bumpier, make it look like it's more detailed than it actually is. But we can make this look even better. Let's go to a specular shader. And you'll notice that the specular shader gives this object some specularity, makes it look a little bit shiny. Okay, a lot of objects in the real world have specularity. Very few objects don't. Okay, but if I kind of zoom away here, you can see that the specularity looks kind of funny. And if I take the light and actually light across the surface, you can see that the specularity looks kind of weird. Okay, the reason it looks weird is because the specularity is not being modulated by any type of map. It's basically being modulated by this specular color right here, which is just this kind of medium gray. Now we could change the color of the gray to something else. Like if I change it to red, you see the way it looks. But that doesn't look too good. The way that we want to modulate our specular map or specularity is with a specular map. So where do we apply specular map? Well, you can see here we have a base RGB color, and we have something called a gloss and an A. What this means is that you need a gloss map in the alpha channel of this texture. So if I go to this texture, and I open up the texture import settings, this texture right now does not have an alpha map. What we need is a grayscale version of this texture in the alpha map in order to get this to look good. So how can we do this? Well, there's two ways we can do it. We can go into something like Photoshop and create it manually there. It'll take longer to do that, and it's a lot more work to have to do that manually, and then you'd have to re-import the texture. Another way that we can do this, kind of the easy way out within Unity, doesn't give you the most control, but it can give you good results fast and easy, is by going up here to the texture importer settings for that texture and telling it to generate an alpha from Grayscale. If I check that on and then hit apply, Unity is going to re-import and it's going to apply an alpha map to that texture. And when it does that, you notice now I can check the alpha and it has an alpha map, basically a grayscale version of texture. And now you notice when we look in the viewport, we don't have that nasty kind of burnt out white specular area right here in the middle. Instead, the specularity is being controlled by this grayscale map, which makes it look much more realistic. And if I take, say for example, the material here, I change the specular color. Now you can see that when I change it to red, it's actually modulated, so dark areas get less specularity and brighter areas get more specularity. So that's the way that it works. And this helps to give your textures, your materials and shaders more realism. So let me go back to a bump specular shader. And what this does, it combines all three. It has diffuse, it has specularity with the gloss map in the alpha, and a normal map. And now you can see that this looks a lot better. So we started off with just a diffuse texture which looked like this. Doesn't look very good. And when we use a bump specular, you can see that there's a huge difference. Now you can see a lot more detail in the floor. It looks like it's sticking up just a little bit. You can see the bump mapping, normal mapping working out really nice. Okay, so I'm going to end this video here. It's been going long enough. In the next video, we're going to start to apply shaders to the outdoor part of this scene and work our way in and start making this look good.